What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, where today I'm going to be going over those 3 essential settings that will allow you to start using your camera in manual mode as opposed to using it in automatic settings. So those 3 settings are your shutter speed, your aperture and your ISO, all of which you cannot have one without the other. So by changing your shutter speed, what you're essentially doing is you're changing how long that shutter remains open in your camera before it then closes again and allows you to capture that image that you're trying to take. So if you're wanting to capture those images that contain more motion in them, such as this one that I took last night, where you can see the traffic passing underneath me, which I set my camera shutter to around 1 second, what I've done is I've allowed my camera shutter to remain open for that 1 second, and what that has done is it has captured all of that light coming into the camera and has allowed you to see those long streaks of light as the traffic has passed underneath me. However, if you're wanting an image that doesn't contain as much motion and you're wanting to freeze that image, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to bump your shutter way up to something around 1/500th of a second or something even faster, so that you can freeze that image and capture exactly what it is that is going on in the picture. Such as this one here, where you can see that my subject matter in the shot is frozen and there's less motion involved in that shot. However, to compensate for that light that you're either losing or you're gaining, depending on what your shutter speed is, you're going to have to change what is known as your aperture. And basically what your aperture does is it also controls how much light is being allowed into your camera. But your aperture also controls what is called your depth of field. And your depth of field is essentially how much of your image you wish to remain in focus, whether it's in the foreground or whether it's in the background. So for example, in this image here, where you can see that my subject matter is in focus, you can see that the background is out of focus. And what that essentially does is it allows you to separate your subject matter from that background and allow them to stand out far more in your shot. So if you're wanting to capture an image with a shallower depth of field, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to drop your aperture down something round about f4 or even something further, depending on what your lens is capable of. So for example, my 50mm lens, which I shot this image on, I was able to drop my aperture down to f1.8, which allowed me to blur out that background and allow my subject, which was standing in the foreground, to stand out way more. However, if you're wanting to capture that image with good depth of field, such as a landscape where you can capture all of that detail that is going on in the background as well as in the foreground, and allow more of your shot to remain in focus. So you've now started to change your shutter speed and your aperture, but you're noticing that your image is still far too dark or either far too bright. And therefore what you want to do is you then want to change what is called your ISO, which is essentially how sensitive your sensor in your camera is to that light that you're allowing into your camera. So if you're shooting in super low light conditions, you're going to want to bump your ISO way up to something around about 800 or something even higher. But the problem with bumping up your ISO is that what happens is you're then introducing what is called digital noise, and that's essentially the grain that comes out in your image. And to reduce that, you might want to drop your ISO down further. However, if you're shooting your shot during the day and it's far brighter outside, you're going to want to make sure that your ISO is down low enough that it is going to darken your image and not blow it out full of light, which you would be allowing if your ISO was too high. You're going to want to practice using these 3 settings so that you can allow them to complement each other to allow you to get that correct exposure depending on whatever it is that you're trying to shoot. That's it for me today, guys. I really hope that the advice that I've given throughout this video will benefit you and your photography and allow you to start shooting with more control over your camera and allow you to start getting better images.